I'm Sorcha. I head up our partnerships here at NationBuilder. I've been with the company for about 5 years. I originally got my start in US politics here in New England, hopping around on a number of different campaigns from presidential to gubernatorial and everything in between, and made the shift into NationBuilder technology software back in 2015-ish. So really excited though today that we have an amazing in-house expert who works with our enterprise customers, Kylie Malloy. So I will let her introduce herself.
Awesome. Thanks, Sorcha. Hi, everyone. Total pleasure to be with you all this afternoon, this evening, whatever time it is, wherever you're tuning in from. My name is Kylie Malloy. I am a member of our account management team here at NationBuilder. And so what that means is that I effectively work with some of our largest customers to make sure that they can implement NationBuilder strategically to accomplish any workflows they need at their organization. A little bit more background about myself. Most of my prior experience has been in kind of the association nonprofit space. So that was what I was up to prior to joining the team at NationBuilder. And I am currently based in DC, but excited to be with you all today and talk a little bit about gamification.
Yes. Okay, so to start us off, I know there are some folks in the room today who do not know who NationBuilder is. So we wanted to ground in our theory of change as a company. And so as you can see, it is solving today's biggest challenges, not being about one leader. It's about millions. And NationBuilder exists to actually make it possible for anyone to easily mobilize their community and ultimately lead them to action. So what does that mean for us? That actually means developing leadership software. It is not just a slogan that we put on a wall. It is something that we do, and how we interact with our customers and build our product grounds in that theory of change. So leadership software, what is it? It is a CRM, so that dynamic people database where you can get a full 360 view of the individual that you are trying to mobilize. We enable you to host your website where you can have action pages and event pages, etc. There is email and text blasting functionality in our software, donation and fundraising, and the much more hint today, we're going to dive into social capital. So what are the results of that? When we think about NationBuilder, a lot of people here think about it in the political space. It is true, we are the world's most used software for politics and advocacy, but there are hundreds of thousands of organizations that use us across the globe to do things outside of the politics and advocacy space, in particular looking at folks who are able to raise millions and billions of dollars through our platform, sending emails and engaging folks through events, both digitally and on the ground. So when we think about what that looks like for customers who are using our fully integrated system, we can see here some really impressive stats on what it looks like to use the full breadth of our platform. The one I really want to point out for you today, as we are going to dive into the features within our software that enable you to potentially achieve this 25 times more signups, is the gamification component of our platform. And so I'm going to hand the reins over to Kylie now, who's going to take us through what it looks like to use NationBuilder's features to gamify and engage with your supporters in a meaningful way.
Awesome. Thanks, Sorcha. So let me walk us through what today's agenda is going to cover. So first out, we're going to start with some framing to understand why it's important to find these top tier supporters. Then we'll actually get into kind of the nuts and bolts of what is social capital, how can it help your organization. We'll talk through some ways in which you can implement social capital as part of your existing strategy. And then we'll talk through some specific examples for 2021, specifically around fundraising and advocacy. And then as Sorcha mentioned at the top, we'll have time for questions and answers at the end, but please feel free throughout the presentation to share any questions that come up in the chat, and we'll do our best to answer those as they come in. So why is it important to find your top tier supporters? So I would say finding your most engaged folks is really critical, because these are the people that are powering the engine of your movement. These are the folks that are responsible for organizing in their own individual communities, among their own networks, bringing in new signups to your organization, new advocates, recruiting new donors, recruiting new volunteers, hosting events. These are the folks that make it possible and scalable for you to have that relationship with your broader audience. And they're really responsible for, I think, driving a lot of the results that come in for your organization. So I think that's why it's really critical to be able to easily understand and identify who these individuals are, just so we can make sure that we're engaging with them appropriately and efficiently.
Okay. So now we're going to have a poll for all of you lovely folks. And the question is, would you know how to find your organization's top tier supporters? So if y'all want to jump in, make sure who's paying attention, we can see, get some answers. All right, we're about 50-50. Okay, keep them coming, keep them coming. All right. Wow, we really are a 50-50 split. Okay. Got a couple more folks who may be doing other things. I get it. Zoom allows you to do that. All right. Okay, so I'm going to close the poll there. So we have got 48% of people on this call today who know how to do that. That is fantastic. And we've got 52% who actually don't. And so I'm going to hand it back over to Kylie to take us through what it looks like to find that top tier supporters.
Awesome. All right, so let's get into it. What exactly is social capital? You've heard us mention this phrase a few times. Let's talk about what it actually means and how it can be beneficial for your organization. So what is social capital? It's a virtual currency through which supporters can acquire points based on actions that they take on behalf of your organization. So what that might look like is being able to award points to supporters for actions that you'd like to encourage, deduct points for actions that you wish to deter, ultimately having a measure for how you can find those supporters, and being able to empower and engage with the leaders within your organization. So you'll see a few screenshots here. One of these is a screen grab of my individual profile within NationBuilder. And so just under my profile picture, you'll note that that's not me, that's my family's dog. So just in case anyone's confused, there's a little bubble here in green that says 43SC, and that SC stands for social capital. So that's the total number of points that I have associated with my record. If you are a current NationBuilder customer, you can explore how many points somebody has, how they've earned those various points, by going into the social capital section of an individual's profile and looking at the balance sheet, which is what you see here. So it's kind of a running view of all the different activities they've taken with the nation, and how I've earned points throughout that time. So what we can see here is it starts out, I signed up on a join page. I started a get out the vote path for 2020, answered a survey question, signed up to volunteer, signed up for a specific volunteer role. All of those are things that allowed me to earn various different points through social capital. So more technically speaking, I want to speak to a few features that are, I think, kind of unique to NationBuilder's social capital tool. So I want to say at the outset, it's fully customizable. So what that means is you can change the name of your virtual currency. So as we'll refer to it today as social capital, but would really encourage folks, if it's something you're currently using or thinking about using, to change it to something that's branded and feels personal and relatable to your organization specifically. So to call out a few examples, one organization I work with is in the construction space. They call these construction coins. So I would encourage you to think about something that's kind of fun and feels personal and unique to your organization, relatable for your supporters. But today we'll be referring to it as social capital. So that's customizable. In addition, the big piece here, which we'll talk about extensively today, is you can customize the individual point assignments that are associated with any given activity. So this is in the settings social capital section of your nation if you're a current NationBuilder customer. So you'll see a really long running list of all of the different activity types that can earn or deduct social capital points for a few different folks. And so what you see over here is just kind of a screen grab of a few different ones. So to talk through some of the examples, you can earn social capital points for attending an event, creating an event, RSVPing. If you cancel your RSVP, you'll notice that you can deduct points. So again, speaking to being able to deduct points for actions that you're trying to deter. You can also earn points for petition signatures, pledges, donations, logged contacts, email opt-ins. So we won't have time to get into each and every activity today, but just wanted to give you kind of a feel for what's possible here. The second piece I'll name is that it's nuanced. So you're able to set different point assignments to reward signups, so individual users, control panel users, and folks that have recruited people into your nation differently. So how that looks, speaking to events, for example. So maybe we want to set a different point assignment for folks for attending an event. So maybe a sign up gets 5 points for that. The person that recruited that individual sign up to the event gets 1 point just to kind of thank them for their effort to bring that person in. But maybe our control panel users don't get points for attending events, since those are folks that are already super tapped into our organization. So just to give you kind of a feel for how nuanced it is. The other piece I'll name is that it's really flexible. So it's easy to make changes retroactively if you want to surface engagement data that somebody's done historically. So I think where that's helpful is if your strategy changes, which I'm assuming most folks can relate to on the call, if at one point in time you find you want to be hyper focused on event attendance. So that's something that's really a focus to your organization. You want to make sure that all of those activities are weighted with the highest point value so you can understand who those folks are that are attending, RSVPing, and hosting events. Maybe in 2020, your strategy had to shift a bit. And you started thinking through petition signatures as a better metric for how folks were engaging with you and wanted to understand who those folks were. You can make changes that will apply to retroactive behaviors that folks have taken across your organization. So social capital can be flexible and shift with you as your strategy adapts. So leaderboards, I think another really critical feature of our social capital tool is that you're able to populate leaderboards, which is essentially a table that ranks supporters based on actions they've taken or social capital that they've earned. So what you see in the screen grab here is a leaderboard that populates the top 12 folks in my nation that have earned the most social capital over all time. I'll note that you can also timestamp that specifically. So if you wanted to create a leaderboard that's specific to a campaign that was only going on in this quarter, that's something that you would be able to set up. But you're able to rank folks by a variety of different actions. So as you can see with this one, it's most earned social capital. A few other things that you could call out there would be most contacts, most donations, most signups recruited, most petition signatures recruited, most RSVPs recruited. The list goes on, but those leaderboards are available for you to create within the people section of your nation. But really, I think the benefit of having leaderboards is that it gives you a really quick and easy way to visualize your data. So I think it's one thing to know that our top supporters typically engage in these kinds of behaviors, and this is what we think they're doing. I think it's really powerful to be able to put a face and a name as to who those individuals actually are. And what we'll talk about again a little bit later on in the presentation is talking about how leaderboards can drive competition and gamify the supporter experience. So giving folks the opportunity to see the community that they're a part of and see what actions they might want to take in order to move further up the leaderboard. And then lastly, I'll mention, in addition to being able to identify your most engaged supporters, you can create leaderboards that surface information specifically about volunteers or point people. So you can create leaderboards that are really bespoke to folks who are already leading within your organization in formal roles. All right, so why is this important? I think with gamification, a lot of folks I'll talk to about it in initial conversations say, we don't want just kind of another metric. We don't want another data point on our supporters. So I want to really reiterate that it's about more than that. It's not about having one additional data point on your supporters. It's about really understanding how they're engaging with you so you can make the right asks to them at the right time to move them to that next step of leadership, to bring others up the ladder of your movement, to be able to give them an option to participate with you in a different level. And so in addition, as Sorcha kind of outlined at the top here, there are some really powerful results that we've seen folks have across our customer base by virtue of using some of these tools. So customers using our social engagement and digital gamification tools recruit 25 times more signups. Folks actively leveraging social capital have 4 times more members, 2 times more petition signatures, 2 times more recruiters. And you'll see that a lot of folks using at least one leaderboard have some really powerful results to share there as well. So I really just want to call out that this is about unlocking better results for your organization, finding efficiencies, empowering leaders. It's not about simply just having another data point on your supporters. All right, so let's talk through how this can actually incorporate into your existing strategies. So I'll imagine for many folks on the call, you already have existing strategies in place. You're not starting out as a brand new organization, although if you are, that's wonderful and we totally welcome that. So I think it's helpful to think about how this can incorporate into strategies that you're already employing. So I'm going to talk about both internal and external uses. And so when I say that, what I mean is Internal meaning like internally using it among your team at your organization, not for public consumption, versus external, in which you're inviting supporters to view and engage with that information externally on a public website, for example. All right, so some internal uses. So definitely would recommend identifying the activities you care about most and assigning those point values accordingly. So I think that's something that's going to be really specific and unique to each and every organization. I'm sure folks on the call are going to have different activities that are most valuable to them. Um, with COVID and social distancing, those may have even changed within the last year. So I think it's really important to be thinking about what's most helpful for you in this moment and assigning those point values accordingly. You're also going to then want to sort your database once you've made those changes to find the folks with the highest social capital. Um, Thinking through next steps there, what are some options for you? Would encourage folks to reach out to those top tier supporters. First of all, just to say thank you. I think it really means a lot for those folks to see that their contributions and efforts and engagement have been recognized, and that their efforts are valued by the organization. So would recommend that as just an easy kind of starting point and touch point to have with folks. I think as a next step, if you're interested in learning more about why they're involved with your organization, that can be really helpful. What are those personal stories that you might want to uplift and share about why this person dedicates so much of their time, effort, and energy to the specific issue or campaign that you're working on? And then lastly, I think there are some other options here. So is that person interested in taking on a leadership role? And I think that can look different for a variety of organizations. So for some people, that might mean they come on board as a staff person, as a field coordinator in their community. That might mean that they're serving in a volunteer role. Maybe that's an advisory committee. Maybe that means that this person gets invites to participate in focus groups. So I think there are a variety of different ways that leadership can be reflected across different organizations depending what your mission is and what your strategies are, but just wanted to call that out. And then of course, many other options there that I will leave it to y'all to think through. But one piece that I really want to hammer in on here is thinking through what can we learn about these folks. So when we're able to easily identify our top tier supporters, let's think through like, does this line up with expectations we would have about who's most engaged with us? What are the activities that these people are engaging in? Is it what we expected? Is it different? And most importantly, what do these folks have in common? So how can we recruit more people like them into our organization that are going to deliver more ROI on all of the initiatives and efforts that we're working on? So thinking through what that might look like in practice, maybe all of our top tier supporters attended a volunteer training hosted by a specific coordinator. Do we need to uplift that person and make sure that they're doing more of our volunteer trainings? Did all of these folks come through one social media campaign? Is that a campaign that we can replicate to bring in more folks? So I think there are really a lot of different implications there. So would encourage folks to be thinking about that piece specifically. All right, so what we'll see over on the right-hand side here is a leaderboard that's internal. So this is just within the people section where this leaderboard has been created. It is not associated with a public-facing web page. But what we can see is that I'm identifying the folks that have recruited the most people into our nation. And so what this can be useful for is thinking through internal strategies is surfacing the staff or volunteers that are making the largest contributions to your goals. Just so you can kind of keep tabs on what folks across your organization are doing. I think this is particularly powerful for people working with a distributed team, working with a really large team, but also for folks working in more small and mighty teams, just being able to kind of keep tabs on what other folks are doing, who's seeing success, who's hitting specific numbers, and just having those learnings surfaced in an easy leaderboard that's easy to visualize. I think another piece here that we can think through is how does this leaderboard enable us to identify those that might be struggling? So maybe, for example, I'm at the bottom of the leaderboard. You can see Sorcha's in the top spot. Is there an opportunity for us to connect? So there's shared learnings between us so that I can be supported in climbing my way back up the leaderboard. And then I think thirdly, you're also able to identify and define exactly what high engagement looks like at your organization. So what is that point value that's most common across folks that are surfaced at the top of these leaderboards? What are the actions that people take to get surfaced to the top of those leaderboards? Are they different than what you expected? So just being able to really define what that looks like specifically for your organization rather than just relying on industry benchmarks or other resources that might be more generalized. And so I'll say that among the organizations I work with, I see folks having a lot of success when this is something they review regularly as an organization. So again, we've talked about how 2020 has been a year of big changes for folks. We recommend reviewing this information on a quarterly basis just to see what's changed. Are there point values that have changed? Like, did we see folks having really high social capital values last quarter? It's changed this quarter. Has it increased? What's different about the ways in which our supporters are engaging with us? All right, moving into external use cases. So I think this is more common and more in line with what folks typically think of when you first hear the word leaderboard and think of something public facing that your supporters can engage with out in the world. So really about gamifying the supporter experience by showing supporters how their efforts stack up against other volunteers, other donors, other petition signers, other advocates that are taking action on behalf of your organization out in the world. Again, I think it helps to encourage friendly competition. I think you're always more encouraged to understand where your efforts fit in and slot in compared to other actual human people, as opposed to just getting a data point in isolation and not understanding how that fits in. It can also be used to distribute rewards. So when I say that, for some folks, that might mean like a physical reward. Maybe you give those folks a $5 gift card if they make it to the top of the leaderboard that month. But I'd encourage people to think through other opportunities for that as well. So that might be a specific digital frame you can use for your profile picture for Facebook that's only made available to folks that reach the top of your leaderboard. That might mean a variety of different things. So I would encourage folks to think through what those options might look like. It also helps supporters understand how their individual actions contribute to your organization's broader goals. So how does my individual petition that I sign fit into the organization's larger strategy? I think it also makes it more transparent for folks and that they can kind of understand how different actions are valued and weighted by the organization that they're affiliated with. And lastly, but most importantly, really helps to build community and deepen relationships. So again, folks get to feel like they're part of something bigger out in the world. They get to see the individual people that are also as concerned and as motivated about a specific issue as they are. They're able to kind of visualize and understand who those people are and share stories among each other about why it's important to them. Importantly, it also enables you to distribute leadership. So you're able to easily identify the folks that are already leading in their communities by bringing in the most petition signatures, bringing in the most donations, bringing in the most new signups, whatever that activity is, and understanding and recognizing how they're already leading out in the world on behalf of your organization.
Awesome. Well, poll number 2. I'm going to launch this poll right now. And I know just by seeing some of the folks in the room that there are people who are already using it. So get in, get your questions answered, and let us know where this is landing for you. Also, just acknowledging, I've seen a couple of questions come up in the chat. We are tracking for those and we'll be getting to them as we go through. All right, couple more folks.
I'm seeing a bunch of yes responses here, so love to see that.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you everyone for participating in the poll. Let's go ahead and share these results with you all. So we've got 84% that can actually see how you could implement that. We've got 6% already using it and 1% who can't, which totally get. This may not be for everyone. So Kylie, I'll pass it back.
Awesome. Thanks everyone for just kind of sharing that quick feedback with us. All right, so let's get into some specifics. I think a lot of what we've talked through is a little bit more conceptual in terms of how social capital might fit into various like external, internal use cases that it can be used for. But I really want to talk about 2 specific contexts just to make it feel, I think, a little bit more tangible for folks. So the 2 that we're going to be focusing on, focused around 2021 strategies, unless you want to make any crazy changes in the last few weeks of 2020 here. Will be fundraising and advocacy. So let's talk through those. All right, so how can you gamify your fundraising experience? First up, you're going to want to make sure to, again, adjust those social capital point assignments for activities related to donating and recruiting donors. as those are probably going to be most applicable for you. Next up, would recommend creating a public leaderboard page to showcase the supporters that have brought in the most donations. So whether that's folks that have made the most individual contributions, folks that have recruited the most contributions, I think there's a variety of different options that would be available to you, but would recommend doing that just so you can have supporters see in real time how are the donations that I'm bringing in or raising myself stacking up against others out in the community that are also fundraising for this organization. We'll talk about this in just a moment and I'll show an example, but this is also a wonderful way to distribute leadership to supporters by enabling them to create individual fundraising pages. And so those are going to be built on NationBuilder's public profile feature, which I'll show an example of in just a moment. But this is a really great way to give folks digital real estate in a way that enables them to show up and lead in their communities and demonstrate their personal connection to your organization. And then again, would recommend sharing information about rewards or incentives for folks for climbing to the top spots of the leaderboard. Maybe it's top 5, maybe it's just the #1 spot for a given month or overall as the campaign is ended. But I think that's really helpful and fun. And then of course, making sure that you're sharing folks regular updates about people's progress. So where do I stand? Where does that fall in relation to others I'm competing with? And how can we make it fun and kind of help us all understand and feel as though we're contributing to a singular goal for the organization we care about. All right, so a few things here. So what you'll see in this screen grab is a public profile page. You can see that I've turned this into my own personal fundraising page. So what you'll see here, again, that lovely profile picture. You can see the social capital tally here for the number of points that I have. I have the opportunity to share a bio about myself, a website if I want to. And then over here is where you would include language about why this particular campaign is really important to you. So why is it important to me that you donate on behalf of this organization? And then what we'll see up here is a progress bar. So we can see how much money I've raised through my fundraisers so far, what my total goal is. You'll see I'm not doing so great, so could use some help there. But that's what this public fundraising page is really useful for. The other thing I'll call out specifically is if I were to share this fundraising page with other folks and they donate through this page, any donations that come in will be associated as donations that I've recruited and will contribute towards that goal. So it's really helpful for enabling folks to really connect with their personal networks and make sure that they're getting appropriate accolades for any of those donations that they're bringing in. We've talked a bit about leaderboards. So again, as I'm bringing in donations, I can kind of move up to the top of the leaderboard, understand how I stack up with other folks, really get to know the other people that are as concerned or as motivated by this mission as I am. And then we talked a little bit about sharing regular updates with people. So how can we do that? I think one of the benefits of having NationBuilder as an integrated and holistic system is that it makes it really easy for you to do that in a way that's scalable. So you'll see here, I have a email blast that's been drafted. It's just telling folks, thanks so much for participating and being part of our fundraising team. What you'll see is there are 2 sections of the content here that are highlighted in gray. What those are smart fields, which are a feature of NationBuilder that will pull in a unique data point about each and every recipient on that email list. So if Sorcha and I are both on this email list, I'll see information in this content of the email that's specific to me. And so the 2 smart fields that I want to call out in particular are, you can see the social capital amount. So I can surface in an email blast the total number of points that a person has. The other thing I can surface is this public profile URL. So we talked about here, this public profile has been kind of repurposed as a personal fundraising page. So that's really a great way for folks to be able to kind of quickly get a link to their personal profile so they can get up and running, customize that, make it feel personal to them, and share that out with their own networks. The other thing here that's a little bit more advanced that I'll mention is using Liquid. I was able to create some conditional logic in the email. So if we want to kind of quickly tell somebody where they fall on the leaderboard, let's say everybody that has more than 380 social capital points is in the top 3 spots of the leaderboard. What I can do is write this in a way that it will surface that content if the person receiving the email has more than 380 social capital points. So we can see that I'm somebody that's in one of the top 3 spots for December. We can include a link for folks to claim their prize. In this example, it's a free t-shirt. But I think there are a lot of different uses for this. And our email tool and having everything in an integrated system makes it really easy for you to share those personal touch points with folks. All right, so switching gears here, let's talk a little bit about how this might be applicable for organizations doing advocacy work. So again, we're going to want to make sure that we adjust those social capital assignments to activities that are related to contacts, path assignments, folks being batch updated, contacts being logged, petition signatures being brought in, whatever is most valuable and most related to the work that you're doing within NationBuilder. Again, we're going to want to encourage folks to create a public leaderboard or public profile page, surface that on a leaderboard to make sure that we're showcasing our supporters that have earned the most points, logged the most contacts, whatever, again, feels most specific, most relevant to your organization and your supporters specifically. And then what we can do is think through strategies. I mentioned this a little bit in one of our sections around internal uses, but what we can do with this leaderboard, again, is encourage that mentorship and information sharing between those that are at the top of the board and those that are not. So what are some ways where we can encourage folks who are in those top 5 spots to contribute to any thought leadership that we're putting out into the world? How can we encourage those folks to share their best practices about having persuasive conversations with voters, encouraging somebody that they want to vote a certain way on a certain issue, having those touch points with people? How can we take all of that goodness that those folks are experiencing and make it into a resource that's then going to be helping to support folks in their continued learning and continued development of their leadership abilities within your organization? And of course, not to mention, that's at the end of the day going to help you all achieve your goals more efficiently. So I think there's a lot of different value that you can get out of that piece. Another thing that I'll mention that I think might be applicable for some folks on the call, a lot of customers that I work with personally in the advocacy space will be using an integrated advocacy application. So we recommend thinking through how those social capital assignments come through based on the activities that are coming through by virtue of that integrated application. I'll show an example of that in just a moment, but wanted to mention it. And then lastly, how can we use this to create a bespoke experience for your top tier supporters on your website? So I showcased the example of Smart Fields and Liquid in that email blast on the last slide. You can actually use that on a web page to create a web experience that's really unique and personalized to individual supporters based on the engagement that they've had with your organization thus far. Just to kind of contribute to that personalized experience, you recognizing the relationship that a supporter has with your organization already, and what's kind of the next step for them to take in order to continue deepening that relationship. All right, so walking through some examples here. So this is a screen grab of a petition site that's on my website here. So it's a petition to rename Washington after my family's dog, Lincoln. So you'll see him in a profile picture, I think, in a little bit as well. When you sign a petition on NationBuilder, you can set it up so that supporters get a prompt to share out that petition within their own personal network to bring more folks in, get more folks involved and signed on to that petition. So there are a few different options here, a few different social media platforms, but that's what folks will see. And so then talking through a specific example, if Rachel signs this petition, she's going to get this social share prompt that's prompting her to share this petition out with her network. So let's say Rachel shares a link to this petition on Twitter. The benefit of using this integrated tool, the social share prompt, is that when Rachel clicks to share that to Twitter, she'll log into her Twitter account. The URL that she'll post in a tweet is going to have a unique recruiter ID that's appended on the end of it. And what that technology does is allows you to track anybody that clicks on that link and signs the petition as being recruited by Rachel. And so if we're thinking through how that relates back to social capital, Rachel, of course, is going to probably receive some points for having signed our petition in the first place. She'll also receive points when other folks in her network are recruited to sign that petition. And so here on an individual profile, if you want to see the number of folks that a person has recruited, you can take a peek in the network tab under recruit. It'll show that Brad appears here. So what we can gather is that Brad has clicked the link that Rachel shared out. He signed the petition. Brad will get points for signing up for the nation. He'll also get points for signing the petition. And so it's really just a wonderful way to understand through those specific social capital points as a metric, how folks are engaging with your organization with specific issues. All right, and then revisiting this piece about apps and integrations. I think this obviously is probably applicable for folks beyond those just using NationBuilder for advocacy, but we are integrated with hundreds of different apps. What I've captured in the screen grab here is an example of a typical advocacy integration that we use. So in this one, you can see that Melissa has contacted her elected official, Marco Rubio. We can see the content of that email that she sent about the Small Business Expense Protection Act. And so how that will work in terms of points is Melissa will get points for having contacted her elected official. So you're able to kind of have this integrate with various different tools that you use, both within NationBuilder and integrated with NationBuilder, so that it's really kind of a holistic capture of all the different activities the supporters engage with, regardless of whether that's on your NationBuilder site or through integrated tools that you might use. All right, so that was a bunch of me talking. Let's open things up for some questions.
Thank you so much, Kylie. So we actually have a bunch of questions. So let's start and run through them. So the first question we had for us from D. Shaheen, who said, does this need to be done organization wide, or can a subgroup do it independently within the one organization?
Yeah, so I mean, I'll say that I think it's most valuable when it's kind of expanded across the organization. So holistically, I can see if I'm on the advocacy team, like these are my top folks. Those people, if they're also engaged with our development team, they're also donating. We have insight into those activities as well. So it can be kind of a holistic measure of how a person is engaging with your organization. But certainly understand that it can be a lot to jump in and get everybody on board with that at once. So I would definitely encourage folks, if your individual team is interested in using this tool, would welcome you to kind of pilot that within your own team and see how that works. And then kind of take those learnings back to other teams to see if it might be applicable for them as well.
Yeah, and the only other thing to add there is it's retroactive, like Kylie said, right? So like if you do decide to take it organization wide and your development team just starts using it for the first beat, you can change the point allocation based on what you've learned. So don't let that stop you from giving it a go. Just a note earlier from Jay Wolf that said bullets 3 and 4 should be on their own slide because they're so important. And that was to reach out to your folks and say thank you and to understand the traits in your supporters. So thank you, Jay. Next question was from Rich Norris, which says, can I customize the social capital actions such as placing a Facebook post or sending a tweet?
Yeah, so I'll say it's not possible to add new activities into that list of actions that can assign social capital or deduct social capital for a given supporter. But I would really encourage you to take a look through that list exhaustively. I know we reviewed, I think, about 10 of those throughout the content today. It's really quite a lengthy list of the variety of different activities that are included in there. So I would encourage you to take a peek just to get a sense of what's available already.
And I just popped that in the chat for folks, and we'll make sure to send that out in the follow-up as well, so you can see a full listing of those actions. We then had another question from Extinction Rebellion. Can we customize the specific tasks allocated for social capital points? For example, if someone participates in a demonstration, so not having each event allocating the same amount.
Gotcha. So I'd say, again, I think that's really where some of this retroactive adjustment comes through. So if, for example, I had a really big event coming up and I want folks to get more points for that event than they normally would for other events that they've RSVP'd for, what you can do is instead of having it apply retroactively, you can change the point value assignments so they only apply to actions moving forward. And then after the event ends, you can change it back to whatever your standard is. So in that way, folks that have RSVP'd for that event in that time will likely have higher social capital values. So that's probably what I would recommend for that given situation.
Awesome. We then had one from Philippe. Can you add a sign up button to the personal webpage that would give the individual person credit for actually being that recruiter?
Yeah, so I think we touched kind of briefly on our recruiter functionality in today's session, but if I'm sharing out links with folks to a specific sign up page using that social share prompt, or alternatively, what you can do is always surface that in an email. So if I wanted to send everyone an email blast saying, hey, if you have folks in your network that you want to encourage to sign up, share this link with them so they'll get attributed as your recruits. That's certainly something you can do, but that's probably a good resource, I think, Sorcha, for us to include in the follow-up as well.
Yeah, and just the other thing on that with your public profile, it is a template. It's a custom template. So you can go in and you can add buttons, you can add whatever graphics or imagery that affiliate with your organization. And when you're doing that, you can hard code into that button the liquid variable for that individual's recruiter link. And so I can share some articles as well in our post up email about pushing that onto a front facing site. So then we had a couple of different questions from the Green Party folks. So the first question was, what's the checklist of baseline features that need to be turned on and in use in our nation to make effective use of social capital? For example, is it public profile pages, personal fundraising pages? All e-blasts have, when the recipient clicks on links to your website in the email, automatically add their email address to forms checked. And so I'm just going to like quickly reflect that back. What's the breadth of the feature set that you need to use within our software to ensure that you are, achieving the gamification components that we touched on today?
Yeah, definitely. So I'd say one of the benefits is that this feature is already like configured with default values for you as soon as you get going with NationBuilder. So it's already kind of set up. Again, just to the points that we mentioned in today's conversation, would recommend adjusting some of those point values for things that are specifically important to your organization. Maybe focusing in on a small aspect of your work just to get started, to get a feel for the tool. But yeah, I think to Sorcha's point, I would definitely recommend creating a leaderboard for your supporters. You can do that within the people section, and then associating that leaderboard with a leaderboard website page type. And so those are kind of, I think, the baseline things you need to have up and running to get started. Making it possible for folks to customize their public profiles is another great option. Just again, so people can put a face to their profile so it's more personalized. It has that information about why they care about your organization, your mission specifically.
Awesome. And just the clarification on our public profile and personal fundraising pages. Public profile is the infrastructure that houses a personal fundraising page, and that functionality can be turned on and off. So they're not two separate things. They are the same infrastructure, but there's just basically a checkbox that allows that to be transitioned into a donation bar. And then the piece that you had asked around specifically in eBlasts, where the recipient clicks on link to a website in the email automatically add to the form. That is a great tactic to use to increase conversion. The one thing I will note, if you have a demographic that tends to forward your emails on, it can be quite confusing, because what would happen there, if I forward my email onto Kylie, my information would populate when Kylie clicked on the link. So I just be cognizant of that when you're thinking about your audience in particular. It tends to resonate pretty well in the millennium bubble. Okay, so our next question from our folks over at the Green Party is, do we have any best practices for monitoring or moderating content on public profile pages?
That's a good one. I think my best recommendation would just be to kind of keep tabs on folks as they're spitting those out, as you put out like calls for folks to complete that information. I don't know that I've personally had any customer experiences in which somebody put information on there that wasn't appropriate or just like wasn't a good fit for the specific kind of campaign that we were running with. But if that's at all of concern, what I might recommend doing is mocking up a sample that folks can refer to. So it's easy for them to kind of get a feel for what you're looking for, what you're asking for, and what's going to be most impactful at the end of the day for the specific campaign that you're asking people to fundraise or organize around.
Yeah. The only other thing on that is creating community guidelines. It's really important if you are asking people to create user generated content that they know the expectations you'll have of them. A page type that is not very commonly used at NationBuilder, but that I personally love and have used it with my customers over the years, is our rules page. And so you can have a look at our rules page and how that can be incorporated in your user-generated content strategy. So Green Party, last question from y'all is, can organization sign-up types, this is a great question, accumulate social capital and or have public profile pages?
Yes, yeah, they can. So that I think is one of the really beneficial uses. I think specifically with organizations that might have like an organizational membership or something, like if you want to empower local chapters, for example, like maybe they have a organization record in your nation, you can identify folks that they're kind of bringing in and assign value to that chapter collectively through social capital points.
Awesome. From Thomas, we have social capital. Does it include Facebook activity? We would like to motivate our party members to share, like, comment on our Facebook content. And if yes, what type of consent would we need within the EU as it pertains to GDPR?
Yeah, so I'll say at the top, I cannot speak to the EU piece specifically just with GDPR. Just most of the customers that I work with are either in the US or Canada. So we can definitely see if we can find some additional guidance on that piece. I also, off the top of my head, can't recall the exhaustive listing of Facebook activities that are included in that activity sheet. So would recommend pulling up that listing, the article that Sorcha shared in the chat. That would be a great resource just to get like a quick pass of what's available within there.
Yeah, and just some things on that. So in terms of NationBuilder's integration with Facebook, when you're looking at social capital attributes, it's going to be grounded in your broadcaster. So whatever broadcaster you're using that is connected to Facebook. So things like a Facebook post has been broadcasted, a Facebook post like, those are things that you can scope to. If you are doing it with GDPR regulations, I would highly recommend that you go through our consent options. And so there are specific consent modulars within email and opt-in, and you can have that language on your Facebook page. So in your description on your Facebook page to let people know that you are collecting data sets. But always when it comes to GDPR, we recommend that you seek legal advice. Okay, the next question from Thomas was, can we add points manually, for example, when someone was working on a policy paper outside of an activity within NationBuilder?
Yeah, no, so that's a great question and something I didn't mention today, so thanks so much for bringing that up. Individuals, you can adjust in individuals' point assignments, which is really valuable for use cases like you just mentioned. So if there's somebody that's like facilitated a meeting for you externally that's not captured within NationBuilder, you can certainly update that person's individual assignment.
Awesome. And Ricardo, we have hundreds of legislative advocacy folks that we work with kind of across the globe. The one that Kylie had shown was the one-click politics. And I say that because I have another question over here about legislative advocacy. So can you award social capital for actions taken through third-party integrations, specifically like phone to action, in that question?
Yeah, so that's actually a really great question. I would say for this, I think goes for apps in general. For example, in phone to action or one-click politics or new mode, whichever one you're using, if the activity that's coming through to NationBuilder is that I called my legislator, that'll come through as like a contacted activity in NationBuilder. So that's kind of how you can determine what that point value assignment should be. For those given activities, I think a few other ones that come to mind for that might be for like petition signatures, other things of that nature. Would recommend just getting an understanding of like how does that activity come through to NationBuilder? What's the activity that's recorded on an individual's profile? And then you can use that to determine which activity point assignments you should update in the social capital settings.
Awesome. And our last question we have is, can I connect social capital to specific tags?
So unfortunately not with that piece. There are a few maybe alternatives that might work just based on the variety of things that you might be using tags for. So for example, I'll sometimes have customers that are using tags in a way that could be reflected as like a path instead. So that might be another good alternative, because you can adjust point assignments for folks that are starting a path, for example. So if maybe that's a good fit for you, whatever the specific tag use case is. The other piece I'll call back to is, again, you can of course adjust individual point assignments. So if that's like, if I'm adding a tag to Sorcha's profile, you can certainly just add some social capital points to her record individually.
Awesome. Okay, well, we've got about 5-6 minutes left. So if there are any other questions, please just pop them in the Q&A. And let me just make sure I haven't missed any in the chat. Mary. Okay. Mary had asked, what is a bespoke experience?
Yeah, so that's definitely a broad question. So happy to provide some more, or I phrased that broadly in the presentation, I should say. So happy to provide some more clarification there. When we talk about bespoke experience, I think I was specifically referring to an individual supporter's experience of your website. So how can we make that customized to reflect that I, Kylie, am not somebody that's visiting your website for the first time. I'm checking out this page. I'm somebody that's recruited a bunch of signups for you. I have like 400 social capital points. How can we make that reflected for that person's experience on the website? And so what we were talking about in terms of the technical tools you can use to do that within NationBuilder would be using those liquid variables to create conditional logic that will say, surface this messaging to this person if they have this many social capital points. And so we definitely recommend taking a look through your audience to get a sense of like what's a normal or average amount of social capital points, what's above average, what's below that, what are different resources that we might surface to a person by virtue of that. And maybe this lives on your website as part of a resource hub. And so that feels customized for folks. So when I visit and I have no social capital points, it gives me some quick resources for getting started. If I'm visiting that page and I have a ton of social capital points, it's a quick message to say, thanks so much for the work that you do. And then maybe some information about ways in which I can contribute to learning across our volunteer base.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Kylie. Edgar, yes, there will be a recording of the webinar. So with that, you will get the recording of the webinar. You will also get some of the information that we talked about. So looking specifically at understanding virtual currency, some information on public profiles and leaderboards as a whole. And if you are not a NationBuilder customer, please do feel free to go ahead and start a trial. You'll get to work with our amazing onboarding team. And if you are on our standard base and, got to hear from the fantastic Kylie Malloy today and have interest in engaging with our enterprise team, please do feel free to reach out to me. You have my email. And thank you everyone for coming today. And Kylie, thank you so much for sharing your expertise.
Yeah, thanks so much, everyone. Such a pleasure to be with you all, and definitely give us a shout if you have any other questions about social capital and how it could be impactful for your organization.